Welcome back into the Draft Room Podcast. My name is Summy, and as always, I'll be your host as we take a deep dive into some of the running backs hitting free agency this offseason. But before we do that, I want to go ahead and remind you guys that I'm going to be doing a couple of giveaways on our social media handles this offseason, and I want to hear your feedback. I'm going to be giving away signed jerseys, signed memorabilia from top players in the NFL. I want to hear which players' jerseys you guys want to win. I want to hear your feedback on the podcast. I want to hear your ideas. Let me know. Get in my DMs. Send me comments. Send me tweets. I want to know, what else you guys want to see on the show. I want to know which players' jerseys you'd like to win. And I want to know how to continually, provide you guys the best information possible. My vision here is to help create a community of fantasy football players that are self-sufficient, self-reliant, fantasy football players that don't need to check other quote-unquote experts' rankings to set their lineups week in and week out. I want you guys to feel empowered to do that yourself, right? And that starts with creating that community. So please feel free to interact with me any way possible on all my social medias. So jumping right in here, I wanted to quickly touch on the Super Bowl that we all just witnessed on Sunday. I'm not going to beat you guys over the head with stats or anything like that. I'm sure you guys have had enough of that over the past week. I just want to quickly touch on a couple of points here. So the first one of them, I'm sure everyone sees this. I'm sure everyone knows this, but the capacity for the Patriots to adapt is incredible. If you guys think back to the middle of the season when Sony Michel first got hurt, we were kind of thinking that James White was going to bear the load and he's going to have 15 to 20 rushes a game along with his usual 10 passes that he catches out of the backfield. But that's not what we saw. We saw Cordero Patterson come out as running back. And he's a wide receiver. He's a punt returner. He's a kick returner. One of the best in the league, too, at that. But that just goes to show, how good the coaching is. They play to each player's positional strengths. Cordero Patterson is really, really dangerous in the open field. And what do you want out of a running back position, right? You want the running back to be very dangerous if he's able to break a couple of tackles. Those are both skill sets that CP has. So back in the season, when Belichick did that, it surprised me, but it didn't really surprise me because being a Patriots fan, I've seen this time and time again where the team is just able to morph into another team, week in and week out. It's able to transform and morph back into whatever team they want to be, and they're really, really good at executing. And I think that's what won them the championship, right? That's what got them to the promised land. And that's what's gotten them to the promised land, 3 out of the last 4 years as well, just the ability to adapt. And I find it really, really funny how Brandon Cooks, who everyone was calling the Patriots crazy for releasing, couldn't make the play on that touchdown pass by Goff. But Stephon Gilmore, who the Patriots were criticized for, given market value for, he was the one making plays not even all night, all season long. And I think that just goes to show, Bill Belichick definitely knows what he's doing. He has a very, very keen eye when it comes to scouting players, scouting their strengths, and realizing where they fit in the offense or the defense. It's just magical to see, honestly, to see a team, change so much week in and week out. But I don't want to, get into anything else. I'm excited for next season. I think there's going to be some really, really good teams, really strong contenders next season. I'm high on a couple of teams, which, we'll talk about in the offseason. But we've yet to see any of the moves be made that are made usually in free agency, which is going to open up next month. So that's going to be exciting. Speaking of free agency, let's go ahead and jump into some of the free agent running backs to watch this offseason. So this is a continuation from episode 2. If you guys listened to that episode, I listed 5 free agent wide receivers to watch. And today, of course, it's going to be the running backs. Now, I want to preface this whole thing with the fact that these running backs might not be running backs that you'll draft next season, but them being released or getting re-signed will affect your fantasy roster nonetheless. If they're put in the right circumstances, they might succeed, they might not. But I'm more concerned about what happens if they're released or if they're, if they end up on a different team. opening up opportunities for players on their current team. So the first player I want to get into is Mark Ingram. So to run through his stats from this last season, he missed the first 4 games due to suspension. He came back in week 5, and he had 138 rush attempts throughout the season, 645 yards on the ground, and 6 rushing touchdowns. That's an average of 4.7 yards per carry, which, I don't rely too heavily on the YPC stat. I don't believe that's a very good indicator of a good or bad running back. I think there's a lot of other factors that go into running back production, but it's just impressive to see him, maintain that pace. In the receiving game, he had 27 targets for 21 receptions, 170 yards through the air with 1 receiving touchdown. Mark Ingram, he's been productive as long as I can remember. He's a great running back. If he has a workhorse role in an offense, he can definitely succeed. I want to get into, if he's released, what's going to happen. We have to remember that Mark Ingram has been phenomenal in actual football. He's been a really solid running back. He's maintained really, really good production. Great vision, power runner, downhill runner, able to shed tackles, no problem. I'm curious to see, if he ends up on a different team, whether they'll utilize him in that third down role. He has shown his ability in the passing game. I think he's a very good 3-down back. I think a team would be lucky to have him as a 3-down back. And he provides that leadership for the locker room as well. But a couple of the top landing spots that I see him going to, one of them being the Eagles, which I feel to be the least likely, just because they have a carousel of guys in the backfield. They have the rookie Josh Adams, who I don't want to say popped, but he did okay middle of the season. They have Ajayi, who's also a free agent this offseason. I never thought Ajayi is a good running back. I've always thought that he's been a product of his environment, product of his opportunity. I don't think he's a good running back. Just watching film on him, I don't think he has the ability to, make quick cuts. He needs open lanes. He needs a good offensive line to succeed. And Ajayi is someone that I'm going to be avoiding next season no matter where he goes. They also have Corey Clement, which, he came on really strong during their Super Bowl run, but this last season he's kind of petered off, shown that he's not a reliable back. He's more so utilized in that third down role. He's very good towards the goal line, as we saw Philly utilize him with. And then we have Wendell Smallwood, who, he was on the roster during the Super Bowl run. They didn't really utilize him that much. I think we saw his efficiency and his production, his volume go up this past season. I feel like he's going to be an integral part of that Philadelphia Eagles offense next season as well. So keep an eye out for Smallwood. But, if Philly parts ways with Clement and Ajayi, I could see some room being made for Mark Ingram here. I think they would definitely value his downhill running as well as versatility in the third down role. Again, I'm not sure if they're looking to bring in another talent. They might just want to work with what they have. Another team that I thought would make a little bit of sense for Mark Ingram to wind up on next season was the Oakland Raiders. And I say that because the 3 primary backs that they were utilizing this past season are all free agents this offseason. Doug Martin, Marshawn Lynch, they're both unrestricted free agents, while Jalen Richard will become a restricted free agent. And what that basically just means is that Doug Martin and Marshawn Lynch have the ability to go out, get an offer or a contract from another team, and just go ahead and accept it if they choose to do so. Jalen Richard, on the other hand, if he were to go ahead and get a contract from another team, the Raiders could then go back and match that contract to keep him on the team. And I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to keep Jalen Richard. John Gruden praised Jalen Richard very heavily during this last season. I think he loves the versatility that Jalen Richard provides with that third down role. He's a great running back in space, makes quick cuts, makes defenders miss as well. I think, Mark Ingram and Jalen Richard could be a really, really dangerous 1-2 punch. Really good combo in that backfield. I think Derek Carr, takes another step forward next year. I don't see Derek Carr as the best quarterback, or I don't see this backfield as the best situation for Ingram to land in, but I do feel like he will be very productive if he does go here. Next team I want to talk about are the Ravens. So Mark Ingram could wind up playing for Baltimore next season. And I say that because Buck Allen and Ty Montgomery are both free agents. Um, it's kind of confusing as well, right? So the team is obviously not committed to Alex Collins. He's a restricted free agent this offseason. I think they let him walk. I don't think he fits what what Jim Harbaugh is looking for. I don't think he's good in that offense. He leaves a lot of yardage on the field when he does play, and I don't think that offense is as good as it can be, especially now that they're completely morphing around Lamar Jackson. I think a power run game could be beneficial to them to open up running lanes for Lamar as well, to give him some space to throw. It could develop a play action game. We've also heard that Lamar Jackson's going to be throwing a lot this offseason. So don't expect the same style of offense that we saw with Lamar during the latter half of this past season. I think Lamar Jackson could develop into a very dangerous passer as well. And I think having a power back on the first and second down could help provide that opportunity for him. Mark Ingram could be a really good fit in this backfield, but again, it's a very muddy situation, and we're just gonna have to kind of wait and let it play out before we make any more speculations on this. But if Mark Ingram does get traded, I think the biggest impact has to be on Alvin Kamara. And we saw what kind of volume and usage Kamara gets without Ingram in the first 4 games of this season. Just to break it down for you guys, the season stats for Kamara, he had 194 rushing attempts for 883 yards on the ground. He had 14 touchdowns, which is insane. We all know Kamara is amazing in the receiving game. That's where he excels. He had 81 receptions this year on 105 targets. He amassed 709 yards, and he had 4 touchdowns through the air, which are, those touchdowns near the goal line. He does get that passing work. He's very heavily utilized in that red zone. I think it was really, really, really interesting stat that I found was that in 2017, his rookie season, he also had 81 receptions on 100 targets. So over the course of 2 years, he's seen 100 targets at least, and he's caught 81 passes. That's a very valuable running back. He's averaging 5 catches for 50 yards every game through the air over the last 2 years. If you play full PPR, that's 10 points as a baseline, which is, what more can you ask for from your running back one? The assumption here is that if Ingram does get shipped out, the volume goes up by default. There's a possibility that the Saints give Alvin Kamara 250 plus rush attempts, and they give him obviously another 100 plus targets. That's utilization that I want in my RB1. He's already, like I said, heavily utilized in that red zone goal-to-go situations. That's not going to change at all next year. Who else are they going to bring in? Even if they sign a rookie, they're not going to give him that work. If they bring in someone from free agency, I don't see him taking away that goal line work from Kamara. I think he's a locked and loaded RB1 next season. But I do expect, if Ingram does get released, I do expect them to make a move, maybe in free agency or possibly in the draft, sign a running back, and maybe take some of those carries and targets away from Kamara. But we're just, again, going to have to wait until the situation plays out. If Mark Ingram gets re-signed to the Saints, I expect the same exact split that we saw this year. In terms of volume, it's a 50-50 split. This backfield is split right down the middle. But Kamara getting those goal line touches, those goal to go touches, and that third down work just makes him that much more valuable. So Kamara is going to be a locked and loaded RB1 next season, no matter what. Go ahead and draft him in the first round. Don't be afraid to do so. Definitely lock that in. All right, so next person I want to talk about, next player here I want to talk about is a little bit of an unconventional player. Someone that you might not expect to see on this list, but it's going to be LeGarrette Blount. I know what you're thinking. It's gross. It's disgusting. Hear me out, though, really quick. I'm going to go over his rushing stats really quick for the season. He had 154 rush attempts. He got 418 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's 2.7 yards per carry. Again, I don't think that's too indicative of a good or bad running back. But the fact that LeGarrette Blount over his career He never dipped below 3.7 yards per carry. I think it's kind of alarming. I think he's fallen off a cliff, and it's kind of the end for LeGarrette Blount. He's old. He's on his way out. He's heading into his ninth season, um, and of course, any offense that he does go to, whether he gets re-signed or whether he goes somewhere else, I think that offense takes a hit if they plan to utilize him. So heading into the 2018 season, we saw the Lions. They drafted Kerryon Johnson. I believe it was in the fourth round of the draft. So they weren't really committed to Kerryon Johnson heading into the actual 2018 season. We saw LeGarrette Blount. He came out as a starter in the first 3 weeks. It was abysmal. He looked so bad. You know, after the team started realizing that, hey, wait, maybe Kerryon might be the better running back here. We might want to thrust him into that primary role. We saw in weeks 4 to 6, it was still a timeshare. LeGarrette Blount, he took 7, 12, and 10 rush attempts away from Kerryon Johnson in weeks 4, 5, and 6. We also saw LeGarrette Blount vulture 2 touchdowns in week 5. I'm sure you guys who played Kerryon that week remember that very, very well. And then the next week in week 6, he also vultured another touchdown from Kerryon Johnson. And that's kind of what he was good for. He was good for that, short yardage, goal to go situation where he can just power through that defensive front, get in for that touchdown. But that's something that Kerryon Johnson has the ability to do as well. And I want to talk a little bit about Kerryon Johnson only because not only is LeGarrette Blount a free agent, but so is Zach Zenner. Zach Zenner was that smaller running back that we saw kind of pop towards the end of the regular season for the Lions. He was really good in that third down back role, but we saw him, being utilized as a first and second down back as well, which is kind of crazy to me. He's a pretty small dude, but both of those guys are free agents. So if they're both released, Kerryon Johnson to me becomes an automatic high-end RB2, low-end RB1. And the reason I say that is because throughout the season, Kerryon saw 118 rush attempts. He amassed 641 yards for 3 rushing touchdowns. And then through the air, he caught 32 passes on 39 targets for 213 yards and 1 touchdown. In his 7 starting games, his 16-game pace would have been 203 rush attempts for 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns on the ground, and then 50 catches for 368 yards and 2 touchdowns. That to me is a solid RB2, low-end RB1. That's production that you're not going to find past the third or fourth round. And I think Kerryon Johnson has the ability to slip down into that range. The goal line work is going to be all Kerryon Johnson. They definitely committed to him as the season progressed. He had a huge game against the Dolphins. He really showed that he deserves that workhorse role and he can pretty much handle it. But a couple of the changes that happened with the Lions this offseason, if you guys don't remember, they just recently fired Jim Bob Cooter, who was with Matt Stafford for years. He was responsible for that high-flying passing attack game. Matt Patricia, the new head coach of the Lions, you could tell he didn't really gel with that style of offense. I think he wants to control the ball a little bit more, and I don't think Jim Bob Cooter had the ability or had the arsenal of plays in his play chest. So they hired Darrell Bevell as the new offensive coordinator. If you guys don't know who Darrell Bevell is, he's known most famously for being the offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks when they won their Super Bowl. So his first season with the Seahawks was back in 2011. You got to keep in mind that Russell Wilson was not on the Seahawks yet. He was going to be drafted in the following season. So that first season with the Seahawks, the offense itself ranked 28th in the league, so almost dead last. And the running game itself, it ranked 21st in the league. Despite that, Marshawn Lynch being on the roster, he still managed to accrue 1,200 yards on the ground with 12 touchdowns. So still pretty impressive numbers for their primary back. I thought that was really interesting. Going into the next season, 2012, actually it's really interesting because Darrell Bevell was the one responsible for scouting and selecting Russell Wilson for the Seahawks. We saw Russell Wilson, come out swinging. In 2012, the offense ranked 17th overall, and they were third in the league in rushing. They had 2,600 rushing yards, and they were averaging about 160 yards per game rushing, which is pretty impressive. Going into 2013, their offense ranked 18th overall, so right around where they were the previous year, and their rushing game ranked fourth in the league with 2,200 rushing yards and about 140 rushing yards on the ground per game. So Darrell Bevell runs a very heavy run ball control scheme. It fits very, very much so with what Matt Patricia wants to do in the system that he was raised in. They want to control the clock. They want to give their primary running back at least 20 carries a game. And I think we're going to see that same trend continue next season. Kerryon Johnson is going to get the volume he needs next season. He's very capable of ripping off those long runs. He has amazing vision. He's very slippery. He's kind of almost like Alvin Kamara-esque, when he's breaking tackles or he's shifting off to the side or he's trying to get the edge. He's very, very hard to tackle, and he's extremely talented. I would be super happy to take him somewhere in the late third round, maybe early fourth round if he falls that far. And I doubt he's gonna cost that much come draft time, but we'll just have to see what happens. Going back to if LeGarrette Blount actually gets re-signed to the Lions, I want you guys to know right now to run like hell. Do not draft any Lions. I would say stay away from their wide receivers too, just because that run game empowers a lot of what Matt Stafford can do. And again, Blunt's fallen off a cliff. I don't think he's going to help any offense. He's only going to hurt them. All right, so the next running back I have on the list here is Spencer Ware. Keep in mind, guys, Spencer Ware is 27 years old, so he's getting to that age, where running backs start to decline in production, and a lot of you might think that, he was slowing down this past season when he was a starter. I want to point out a couple things to you, right? So Kareem Hunt, he was cut in Week 11. Spencer Ware, we saw him come on as a starter in weeks 12 and weeks 13. But even then, he was still splitting the workload with Damian Williams. So in my opinion, Spencer Ware never really got the opportunity to be the true workhorse for this team, this season at least. He had 51 total rush attempts for only 246 yards, which is still pretty efficient. 2 touchdowns on the ground. And we saw, he still has the receiving chops. He caught 20 passes on 23 targets for 224 yards. That 16-game pace, just to show you guys, 232 rushing attempts on the ground, 976 yards, 8 touchdowns, and then 48 catches for 472 yards. So he might have looked a little bit rusty, but if you guys really think about it, who wouldn't look rusty after missing an entire season due to injury and then barely seeing the fields for another year? I personally still think he's a true 3-down running back. I think Spencer Ware is a great running back still. We have to keep in mind that practicing versus actual play time is very different. It usually takes about 3 to 4 weeks for any player to get in the swing of things and get adjusted to getting hit and making those cuts. And we see that every year, where the first 2-3 weeks, we see some players pop and then they die down. But then we see the true talent come out because, everyone's getting into the swing of things and everyone just needs to get hit a couple times. As far as age goes, it could possibly have an impact for Spencer Ware next year. But the sample size shown in 2018 was too small to determine if age is affecting him or not. I don't think it will. I still think he's a very, very good running back that any team would be very happy to have. If he's re-signed, however, I could see the Chiefs re-signing him for sure, just because Kendrick West is also an unrestricted free agent, and I could see him leaving. But if Spencer Ware is re-signed, I think that it might be a split heading into next year between Damian Williams and Spencer Ware. Obviously, Damian Williams, he's shown what he can do given that workhorse role, but I still feel like Spencer Ware is a true talent in the backfield. Kansas City doesn't seem too committed to Spencer Ware, and putting myself in his shoes, I would ideally like to test free agency to see if I can land a lead role elsewhere, see what kind of money I can bring in. So even though I could see Kansas City bringing him back, I don't think he's on this team next season. And if that's the case, Damian Williams is a very, very good running back to have on your fantasy team next year. So he started 5 games this season, 3 of them coming in the regular season from weeks 14 to 16, and then the latter 2 games coming in the divisional round and the AFC Championship round of the playoffs. In those 5 games that he started, he saw 69 rushing attempts. He amassed 362 yards on the ground, 5 touchdowns. He caught 23 passes for 209 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, if you extrapolate that out to 16 games, it comes out to 1,158 rushing yards for 16 touchdowns and 74 receptions for 670 yards and 10 touchdowns, which I don't think is a sustainable figure. I don't think that's sustainable heading into next season, even though this offense was arguably the most high-powered offense in the league. I think it regresses a little bit, and I don't think the running back sees this much production next season in Kansas City. It's an absurd pace. We all know it's a very high-value position in this offense, but we have seen Andy Reid's tendencies to step away from the run game. He was pretty consistent this year, however. The lowest rush attempts in a given game this year by Kansas City actually came in Week 6 against the Patriots. They rushed 17 times that game. And for those of you who don't remember, that game was an absolute shootout. It was the most exciting game to that point of the season, and I think it was in the top 3 most exciting games in the entire season. But for Andy Reid to still stay dedicated and run 17 plays on the ground just shows a newfound dedication to running the ball more consistently for this offense. So that being said, a couple potential landing spots that I see Spencer Ware heading over to. Number 1 would be Chicago. Benny Cunningham, who's a backup to Jordan Howard, is an unrestricted free agent. I think Benny Cunningham is also a very good running back who can find a good contract with a team, possibly get in a split backfield situation next season. And in all honesty, Chicago doesn't seem too dedicated to Jordan Howard. We saw Jordan Howard's production take a dip. We saw how Matt Nagy, he game plans for the opposing team on any given week. So Jordan Howard could easily be scripted out. I think this offense in Chicago needs a running back that's more dynamic, that has more passing chops, that's able to be utilized everywhere in the field. And I don't think Jordan Howard is it. So I could see Jordan Howard either being traded or cut or released by the Bears and then replacing him with a player like Spencer Ware. Another potential landing spot that I see would be the Miami Dolphins. And the reason I say that is because, number 1, it's an entirely new coaching staff. We saw B-Flow, Brian Flores, become the new head coach of the Dolphins just a couple of days ago, right after the Super Bowl. He came out this week and he said that he plans to game plan against his opponent on a week-to-week basis. And what that kind of tells me is that you're looking for a running back that's very versatile. You need a running back or a set of running backs that, aren't specialized with just first and second down duties. You need running backs that are able to be split out wide, go into the slot, catch passes, show up big in those third down situations. I really do believe that Spencer Ware is an upgrade for all the running backs on this roster. Frank Gore, who's 36, Brandon Bolden, who's 29, Centerize Penny, who's 27, are all unrestricted free agents. Kenyon Drake, I believe to be a very, very talented player who I think could have some more opportunity next year. He's still on his rookie deal. Even if they do dedicate a little bit more volume to Kenyon Drake, I think if Spencer Ware were to come into this backfield, he would find success on the ground. And the last team that I see Spencer Ware heading off to could potentially be the Atlanta Falcons. We all know Tevin Coleman. He's probably going to be signed somewhere else. He had a pretty dismal season this year in terms of efficiency, but the volume was there, right? We saw the Falcons kind of pull away from Tevin, try to give the ball to Ito, see what they have in that running back. Ito Smith is not anything special. I think the Falcons realize that he definitely still needs some more time to develop. And to top that off, Devonta Freeman, his health is still in serious doubt. He has a history of concussions. He's a very, very physical runner, and he's come out and said that he's not going to change the way he runs or his style of running. And I think signing Spencer Ware could help alleviate some of that workload off of Devonta Freeman while still maintaining the run pass game integrity. I don't think they skip a beat if they sign Spencer Ware. I think this is probably the best spot for him to land in. I wanted to round out this episode with a couple of honorable mentions. These are players that I will be bringing up in future episodes during the offseason, but I didn't feel comfortable putting on this list just because I want to see how the situation plays out a little bit more. The first of those is going to be TJ Yeldon. He's a running back for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he's going to be an unrestricted free agent this offseason as well. We saw Leonard Fournette, battled injuries all season. TJ Yeldon really had to carry the brunt of this running game pretty much all season long. We saw him rush for 104, rushing attempts on the ground. He had 414 yards, 1 touchdown, averaged 4 yards per carry. He had 55 receptions, almost 500 yards through the air, and then 4 receiving touchdowns as well. He played 14 games, but he started only 5 of them. We saw Carlos Hyde come in week 7, and then he was given the starting duties in week 8. But I think that TJ Yeldon is a very, very effective fantasy running back as well as a real running back as well. So I definitely keep an eye out for this just because if he leaves, I think it's a huge boost to Leonard Fournette, especially his passing game work. Another honorable mention I wanted to bring up was Bilal Powell. Bilal Powell is an unrestricted free agent. Not the best offense here, but we really saw the young running back Elijah McGuire kind of pop towards the end of the season. There have been comparisons that some experts, quote unquote, have made about Elijah McGuire, comparing him to Le'Veon Bell, which I don't see, not even close to that. But Elijah McGuire is definitely a very talented back, and I feel like if he's given lead back duties, he can be very, very successful in an offense like the Jets, especially with Adam Gase coming in, who is an offensive-minded coach who will utilize a primary running back on first and second down and possibly even third down. But that's going to do it for today's episode of the Draft Room Podcast. So let me know what you guys thought. Go ahead and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at DraftRoomPod. I'm going to be doing those giveaways on Twitter and Instagram, so you want to make sure you're following us to stay up to date, not only on our latest episodes, but to feel free and interact with me, slide into my DMs. Let me know what you think of the shows. Let me know what you guys want to see in future upcoming shows. I'll be more than happy to provide it for you. But other than that, I will see you guys next Tuesday. Stay fresh.